Hi, and welcome to another edition of the NAIC Insight Series. I'm your host, Bob Green, and I am delighted to be joined today by Tony Lee, co founder and managing partner, One Rock Capital Partners. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate you having me.
No, I'm excited. This conversation got delayed, and I appreciate your patience. Looking forward to delving in and learning more about you and One Rock. With that in mind, Tony, tell us about yourself, what you do as co-founder and managing partner, and what is One Rock.
Let's see. I was born in Los Angeles, but I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. I'm the son of two immigrants from Korea. I ended up in Tacoma because my father ended up joining the U.S. Army. In short, I moved around a lot growing up. In fact, I went to 7 different schools, K through 12. When I was 13, I actually moved to Korea as my father was stationed overseas. And I must say that that was quite a culture shock, having grown up in the U.S. I've just been sort of on the outside, trying to adapt in new environments, new schools, new cultures, all throughout my life. And in a strange way, that's kind of helped me in private equity, as it turns out. We're always meeting new management teams, looking at new business models, being in different parts of the country and sometimes different parts of the world. But that sort of moving around was, I think, in short, kind of painful while it was happening, but in the long run, I think beneficial to what I do currently today.
Outstanding. So One Rock is, I won't say rapidly because it's taken you, a period of time to get there, but One Rock is one of the largest diverse owned firms in the country. You guys are investing out of Fund 4, $7 billion in assets under management. First of all, congratulations on all that success and all your hard work. But tell us about the firm, the investment thesis, and what you aspire to do for your LPs.
Sure, Bob. Yeah, we've been around for a little over 14 years. My co-founder, Scott Spiel, and I spun out in 2010. We ended up reconstituting a lot of our ex-colleagues together. And today, some of our ex-colleagues represent roughly 7 of the 11 partners that we have here at One Rock. And in short, we're continuing to do the same things that we did previously, and that is having a value-oriented buyout strategy, primarily in the real economy sector. So we invest in the chemicals, process industries, manufacturing, food and beverage manufacturing, distribution, as well as industrial business services. And that's where we spent pretty much all of our time at our previous firm. So we're sticking to our knitting. I mentioned we've got a value orientation. That's the way we're trained, and that having invested in private equity since 1997, value, I think, is always in vogue from our standpoint. And we also bring a very heavy operationally focused strategy as well. And we've got 29 full-time and exclusive operating partners who help in our daily investment activities.
Yeah, so Tony, one of the things I love whenever we talk about One Rock is how clear and even in simple terms you describe the firm, right? You told me, Bob, these are not high-flying, sexy, attractive deals. This is the industrial part of the economy. What is it you like about that segment of the economy, Tony?
What is it that I like? Well, at the very beginning, I'm not sure I liked it. It was sort of assigned to me. And, I eventually spent a lot of time doing it. And I got to appreciate just how important a lot of these businesses are to the overall economy. In fact, roughly a quarter, 30% of the economy, both here and in Europe, is comprised by the real economy sectors. Mm-hmm. So the very sectors where we're focused. But at the same time, maybe because, at the outset, it doesn't seem to be all that exciting, it really hasn't attracted a number of folks that want to specialize in these areas from a private equity standpoint. And that has basically made this area more exciting for me, especially in the seat that I sit in today. And when we look at the M&A volumes, again, it kind of mirrors the percentage of the overall economy. So roughly 25-30% of M&A deals happen in this space. And we like the fact that there has not been a proliferation of private equity firms raising industrial-focused, funds.
Mm-hmm.
So from that standpoint, the competitive dynamic, we find it to be extremely attractive.
When you look across the last 5 years, especially, you almost can't talk about any business with describing what impact COVID had on the business. So, really, whether it was from a One Rock standpoint or from an industrial segment of the economy, talk a little bit about what you guys endured over the 2.5, 3 years that COVID was dominating the headlines.
Yeah, so we like businesses that manufacture products, package products, distribute products, etc. And it really ends up being these types of businesses are really the backbone of the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And during COVID, as you may recall, there was sort of a delineation of businesses that were essential versus non-essential.
Yes.
And fortunately for us, we had two things going in our favor for the most part. Number one, because we were largely in the real economy sectors, all of our businesses were deemed essential. Mm-hmm. And therefore, all of our businesses were allowed to continue manufacturing, continue packaging, continue distributing, etc. And I think our employee base, even though we're going through a very scary time, appreciated the ability to continue to be employed and continue to generate income for themselves and their families. And the second dynamic is that, as you may recall, supply chain became a topic, and the fragility of supply chains became exposed during COVID. And for the most part, because we're investing in North America predominantly, our businesses tend to be in region for region. And so they're manufacturing for customers in the very regions where we are making the products. And as a result, we were not as exposed as others to lengthy supply chains that may have been, dependent on, far off regions, primarily in Asia. So we benefited from that dynamic as well. I like to say, we had sort of this in mind. I would say that was a bit more serendipity more than anything else.
Yeah. So as you've talked to me about the strategy, you've used 3 words about your deals: attractive, improvable, and cheap. So hopefully I've regurgitated those back to you. I'm a pretty good student, Tony, but attractive, improvable, and cheap. Tell the audience what those terms mean in terms of your investment strategy and how you go about evaluating a fit across A, I, and C.
Sure. So we can, crystallize our strategy or the things that are important to us here at One Rock in those 3 criteria. First, attractive. I mean, we are looking for businesses that are leaders in their industry, whether it's market share, brand, technology, capacity, etc. And the reason for this is that, as many people know, we ultimately have to monetize our assets. And when you are starting with a business that is inherently attractive, you're going to have a much more easier time monetizing and finding buyers for that asset. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is that criteria number 2 is that it's got to be improvable during our ownership. I mentioned the heavy operational orientation. We're looking for businesses, while attractive, still have a lot of improvement potential. And that's because we like to be in control of that value creation process and be more immune to what's going on in the macroeconomic environment. So if we can fix a business, if we can improve a business and generate much higher cash flows with that business, we're pretty sure that we will have generated value for the stakeholders, independent of what is going on with the macroeconomic environment. And by contrast, if we looked at a business that was firing on all cylinders, it was just not improvable one iota, the only way that you're going to sort of improve is by hoping that the macroeconomic environment continues to lift that business. And so since we're not in control of the macro, we try and shy away from situations that are not improvable.
Got it. Very clear. So let's dive in, Tony. Let's pick out one of your portfolio companies and then give us the the A, the I, and the C, and talk to us about what you've done to really demonstrate the expertise, the operational expertise of One Rock.
Sure. I will talk about a business that we carved out of a large chemical company that everyone's heard of called BASF.
Okay.
We do a lot of complex carve-outs, and that is precisely how we can get attractive businesses, with a very attractive entry price at a very attractive value, and that's how we sort of reconcile those two competing concepts. In this case, what was the business? It was a plant-based ingredients company disguised as a chemical business. Okay. And it had only one plant in Kankakee, Illinois. This is a company that we renamed Kensing. So, what was attractive about this? First of all, everyone knows that being plant-based is very good, and they had exceptional technology. They were the leaders in their field, and the products were basically natural vitamin E, sterols, and surfactants, and they went into end markets such as food, pharma, and consumable products such as soaps and shampoos. Okay? Things that are very stable, growing, and very steady, and will be consumed regardless of what's going on in the overall economy. So very, very, very attractive. Why was it improvable? Well, this was a business that was part of a much larger acquisition that BASF had made, and it was sort of the forgotten asset and the non-core asset of the acquisition that they had made. So this was definitely not top of mind for a much, much larger corporation. So in our minds, it did not get the time and attention, and that's understandable given the size and scale of BASF relative to the Kensing business. And then, it was a very complex buyout because, first of all, it didn't come with a management team at all. The new buyers were supposed to create IT infrastructure, prior to taking ownership. And then, sort of the most difficult factor here is the fact that BASF, in this case, was unwilling to provide any transition services agreements whatsoever. So in other words, on the day of close, they hand over the keys, you own the asset, and BASF is not willing to take your calls, help you in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
And at the same time, you have to ensure that there's smooth transition with your employee base and the customers. Even though they may have ordered from BASF last week, they're now receiving from a One Rock owned business. And that had to be done seamlessly. And not everyone is set up to do those types of buyout transactions. And because of that complexity, we were able to acquire the business at a very attractive multiple relative to the overall industry. So we bought a leader in a very attractive end market. It's eminently improvable because, again, it was a forgotten asset or a neglected asset, non-core, and was neglected for a reason. And at the same time, we were able to get our hands on it at a very attractive price. And since then, obviously, we have built out an incredible management team. We've executed on 3 additional acquisitions, and we've increased both the size, scale, and the geographic breadth of this business. And so, that's very core to the strategy that we like to employ here at One Rock.
Very, very helpful. Let me ask sort of a basic question, Tony, as it relates to operational expertise. I've learned that there are 2 types of operational challenges, one that you've seen before and one that you've never seen before. As you take on a company with no IT infrastructure and no shared services agreement, shared services support, is that something that you were comfortable with because you had done it before, or you knew the strength and capability of your team and it didn't matter?
It's both, actually, Bob. Carve-outs have been roughly half of the deals that we've done here at One Rock, and
Yep.
at a prior firm, it was had a healthy representation of the types of investments we made as well. And so this is why we have a healthy roster of, again, full-time and exclusive operating partners. That is so that we can be prepared and capable of executing on these types of investment opportunities. And so, we've done this before. Look, you're never going to get things perfect, but having a large number of reps, where all the watch out areas are going to be. And if you've never done an IT carve out, this is not something that one should undertake without the proper resources and the experience base. This is not something that I would recommend where you hire external third parties and have them be accountable for executing a core part of the carve out process.
Yeah.
So in short, we had tons of experience. We were also equipped with the in-house operating resources, and that's what gave us not only the capability but the confidence to take on this particular assignment.
Tony, when we went through our prep session, you said something to me, and I'm not sure you realized what an impact it had. But as you talked about the culture and the way your firm executes, you used a phrase, "We're willing to do the hard work," Bob, right? Talk about that willingness to do the hard work, because you and I both know you can look at a deal transition plan or work plan, and there are a lot of firms that are going to look at the volume of effort required, and they're going to make choices about whether they want to do that deal. When you said to me, "We're willing to do the hard work," you were basically affirming that there was a stake in the ground. Talk about how that manifests itself and what type of strategic advantage that gives One Rock.
I think it's a huge advantage. Well, first of all, let's take a step back. Human nature, as we all know, is one where we want to avoid doing extra work.
Right.
We're trying to find the most efficient path to accomplish whatever it is we want to accomplish. So we are, as humans, inherently wired to avoid doing a lot more work than we need to. Unfortunately, in our business, there's price and there's value, and that to me is the equalizer. And we made a decision a long time ago, given that investing is an uncertain business. It's very hard to predict the future, try as we might. And as a result, we've religiously adhered to a value orientation. And as such, we've tried to figure out, how do we get our hands on the best assets, the most attractive assets for the lowest price. And oftentimes the reconciliation, I said, was complexity, but complexity is another term for a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
And we are willing to trade our extra labor, our extra time and energy in exchange for an attractive and lower price. And what's great about that strategy is that the value creation ultimately ends up being within our control. In other words, if we throttle back our efforts, then we're going to be sad, right? With the outcomes, it's going to be less optimal. But if we continue to throttle up our efforts, we know that we're going to impart value and make everyone happy in the process.
So I'm going to use what that question I just asked you and your answer to transition away for a moment from the business and talk a little bit more about you. And I know you haven't been looking forward to this part of the conversation, but you shared so much about who you are as a person. Um, Kind of your personal creed, like who is Tony Lee?
Yeah, a lot of people that know me know that I'm a big stickler on credibility,
Yep.
trust, and what I like to call your verbal FICO score,
Yep.
and that's a term that we use here, and it's a measuring stick for the parties that we deal with. It's part of our culture, and I believe it's one of the reasons why we've been able to grow as an institution. In short, I think people trust us, and that's because we've been adamant about maintaining and protecting our credibility. So
Mm-hmm.
verbal FICO score, and by the way, Bob, it doesn't matter no matter how small. If you say, hey Tony, let's meet up for dinner, next Friday, 6 o'clock, at this restaurant, and I say, absolutely, I'm looking forward to it.
Done.
You don't have to email me or text me again. I'm showing up.
Right.
That's
Yep.
it. It could be as little as that. But obviously, there are far more consequential situations.
Yeah.
If you are telling a seller, I'm going to show up and this is my price and these are my terms, and of course, it might be subject to a few remaining items, you're better served sticking to exactly what you said, you were going to do.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think we're finding out that, credibility is in short supply. There aren't that many people, if you really get down to it, that you can say you absolutely trust. They say it once and that's it. You can take it to the bank.
Yep.
And, it's one of the things that, first of all, seeing that rubs me the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, we view it as a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
So it continues to be an area that we emphasize here at One Rock.
So Tony, I love to bring out interesting things about people's personalities, and oftentimes sports and music tend to be things that are interesting. In your case, I'll zoom in on sports. Rumor has it that you played a pretty mean game of rugby growing up. Is that true? And tell us about that.
Yeah, it was true, and I blame my co-founder Scott for getting me into that. He convinced me after some time to play rugby, and
Yeah.
I grew up playing like most kids in America, basketball, soccer. I played a bunch of things, competitively. But by the time I got to college, I was sort of lost, and at least I was not playing anything competitively. And Scott basically convinced me, and he convinced me in a very clever way. I'm 5'11", and back then I was 160 pounds.
Yep.
And I thought, I am not built for this sport.
Yeah.
And Scott was very clever, and he said, there are different positions for different sizes. And for some reason, that kind of did the trick. And
Scrum is scrum, though, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So Scott's larger. He's a forward. I was a back.
Yep.
I played fly half and wing. And on the one hand, I got so much out of the sport.
Yeah.
And I got so much out of trying something that made me extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And there's a lesson in that alone. And I eventually got my future business partner out of just saying yes. What I learned is that I'm not as fast and strong as I thought I was.
Yeah.
And there's always someone faster, stronger, etc. But what I did learn is that rugby is a team sport. Actually, I don't know if you know this, Bob, but there are 15 players on a side.
Yeah.
And so it's even bigger than football, which has 11 on a side. So it's highly coordinated, and indeed there are different positions, and they tend to have different sizes and shapes, similar to football. And that sort of organized chaos, was a very, very good lesson. And frankly, that's a little bit like private equity.
Yeah.
It's you've got a large group of folks that you're trying to manage. This is not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be, hard, strenuous, and this is where tenacity and that competitive spirit really comes in handy. And so, in a weird way, it was a great teacher for many of the things that I would go on to do after college. But after some of the injuries that I had, I'm glad I did it. I would never do it again. Let me put it that way.
I will tell you, I played a lot of football growing up, and when I played youth football, the immediately after our practices, a rugby club practiced on the same field, and these were college age men, and obviously they were bigger, stronger, faster than us, but I thought football was the toughest sport. It was certainly the toughest sport that I played, but I thought football was the toughest sport until we hung around one day, waiting on our parents to pick us up, and we actually watched these guys play. And in addition to not being able to figure out the game, it was just amazing the type of hits, how little equipment, but also how much enthusiasm they had. Nobody was loafing. I mean, it really showed you what commitment to a sport meant. So whenever I hear that anybody played rugby, I probably evaluate them a little bit more deeply from a sanity standpoint, making
Yeah.
sure that they're all there. But two, you also understand that it's not a casual thing, right? You're not standing on the sideline shooting basketball jumpers or pitching a baseball. Rugby requires a level of commitment that is unparalleled.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. You're absolutely right. The less committed you are in,
Mhm.
making a tackle or whatever, the more likely you are to get injured. And so you really have to, enact the technique and really, put yourself out there. What I noticed, during my days in college playing is that, our team wasn't necessarily the biggest team, but we had very skilled players. And we would routinely play against larger schools that had larger athletes,
Yeah.
excellent athletes that had played D1, football or other types of sports. But it was the coordination, that we played with that would outmaneuver, much more talented, much more physically gifted
Yeah.
teams over and over and over again. And I just, that's one of the things. I'm 52 now, but that's one of the things that still is stuck in my mind. That and obviously all the relationships that were developed when you go through kind of the crucible of something that is very, very difficult and physically arduous.
For sure, for sure. So, Tony, I wanted to move back to the business a bit. Whenever I talk to founders, invariably we have a conversation about fundraising. Some love fundraising, some hate fundraising, some just view it as a necessary thing. You surprised me in a sense because one, you've been not. This didn't surprise me that you've been very effective. You raised $7 billion, but you actually told me there are elements of fundraising you actually enjoy. You mentioned that you enjoy meeting people as a part of the fundraising process. I'll walk through some of the things you said, but talk to me a little bit about your appreciation for meeting people while you fundraise.
Yeah, and maybe this goes back to my upbringing,
Yeah.
Bob. Every couple of years, in a different school, different environment, having to adapt and understand, what are the cool kids like in this school? Like,
Yep.
what shouldn't I do in this particular community, etc. And believe it or not, I actually grew up quite an introvert, and I was an introvert for a very, very long time. And in retrospect, I'm not sure I was a natural introvert, but suffice to say, I've developed into a people person, I like to say,
Yeah.
and I do like to meet people, especially from all different parts of the globe,
Yeah.
different parts of the country, and I view meeting people as a learning exercise. I learned so much about the way they are thinking, based on their experiences. And I'm trying to absorb as much of that, as possible. And I don't view this, as, transactional. One of the philosophies that we espouse, here at One Rock is that life is long, and so you're just going to meet the same people, or likely going to run into the people, for over and over again for some time. And so my biggest takeaway is just learning from all the people, and as a result, I rather enjoy it.
Yep. That was very clear when we talked about it. The other thing that you mentioned is that you actually enjoy telling the One Rock story, right? Being able to open up and share with people what you've built, the culture you've created, the things that you and your team believe in. Talk about that aspect of how you find it in terms of talking about the firm and talking about what you all have built.
Yeah, it sounds terribly immodest by saying, I like talking about our firm. But one of the things that Scott and I are really proud of is, the culture and the people that we've, assembled together. And we've been a very stable and growing organization, and one that I think continues to evolve and try to get better at what we do day in and day out. And we've really enjoyed that, and as a result, I kind of like talking about our firm. That being said, I kind of like to listen to myself.
Yeah.
As I'm sort of talking about the same thing over and over again, and I always try and think whether or not the words that are coming out of my mouth could be improved, or our activities could be improved. Things change, times change, techniques change, so on and so forth. And so it's also a good way to just continue to stress test whether or not what we're doing is relevant, in this day and age. Yeah. So I don't mind it sometimes.
Yeah, Tony, you never have to worry about being not modest. You're one of the more modest people I've met in the industry. So when you say you like telling the story, I didn't take it as immodest at all. So one of the other things that you mentioned was investing in relationships. You've talked about over the course of your career, you've invested in relationships. People have invested in you from a relationship standpoint. Whether that's mentoring, whether that's coaching, or whether that comes in other forms, talk a little bit about what you mean by investing in relationships, and maybe give some examples of where you've done that.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate in that I started very early, just developing relationships, developing a network, and even if I got out of work late, I would still go meet somebody. And have drinks, or just go hang out into the late night. And that was just a part of what I did. Now, I didn't do that with the notion that it would be beneficial, and there was no calculus behind it other than the fact that I enjoyed doing this. But as it turns out, and this is what I counsel a lot of my mentees, and I have a lot of mentees, and I like developing relationships with people both older than me, from whom I can learn, and also younger than me, where I can also learn, but also impart my experiences. And in a weird way, One Rock kind of wouldn't be here if it weren't for the developing of relationships. And what do I mean by that? At our prior firm, we had an association, a partnership, a strategic partnership with Mitsubishi Corporation. Okay. Mitsubishi Corporation helped One Rock get into business, with seed capital, anchor investment, et cetera. And when I first joined, we had at my prior firm, we had Mitsubishi secondees. We had employees from Mitsubishi, and I developed a relationship with the more junior of the two gentlemen who worked with us at our prior firm, called Ripplewood. And, you know, for 13 years, I worked really hard, but I kept in touch with this gentleman, Yoichi Tamagawa. And fast forward 13 years later, Yoichi was instrumental in helping getting, you know, seed capital and an anchor investment in One Rock. And it was Yoichi and another individual, Ichiro Miyoshi. And, you know, I remember Scott and I, with Yoichi and Ichiro, we were at a Yankees game that ended up getting rained out, or it was rain delay. We went downstairs and we sort of sketched out, you know, the concept of One Rock. You know, I wouldn't say it was on the back of a napkin, that would be too convenient, but, you know, over some beers.
Yeah.
And, you know, because they had known us for so long, you know, it was not that difficult. And now, you know, the lesson here is that I did not befriend Yoichi, you know, in 1997 because I thought 13 years later I was going to start my own firm and I was going to need him.
Right.
I befriended him because it was just a natural thing to do, and I learned a lot from Yoichi, you know, during the next 13 years, and I'm still friends with Yoichi today, and that's, you know, goodness, you know, over 27 years.
Yeah, I mean, look, that really demonstrates making relationships because that's who you are, not for any transactional purpose, right? You talked, the last thing I'll mention that you talked about that is just rare these days is you talked about treating your LPs, big and small, with respect. And just talk a little bit about that. I think everybody understands the power that LPs hold in this space. But, you know, with things like most favored nation status and anchor investments and seed investments, it's really easy to pay attention to the big LPs. But a lot of times people treat the smaller ones different. You made a point to talk about treating them both with respect. Talk a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, you know, when we were starting One Rock, you know, we went through some very difficult times, and we just were so appreciative of anybody that would give us the time, you know, of day. And we were extremely appreciative of anyone who, you know, would pick up their pencils and engage. And, you know, Scott and I come from, you know, very similar, like very modest backgrounds. And so I think, you know, we just tend to appreciate, you know, people that will do anything for us, regardless of what it is or the size of the commitment. And so that's how we're sort of wired as people. I also think that we also have reinforced the concept of manners and being courteous. And I think that concept has become more rare, especially as, you know, forms of communicating, you know, are largely through electronic devices, emails, you know, emojis and the like. It's, you know, it's hard to, it's sort of develop the etiquette of just being a nice person, you know. And of course, COVID really didn't help because we literally became suspicious of people, you know, standing next to us and the like. So that kind of pushed us in the opposite direction. But, you know, if you want to get very, you know, sort of clinical, I mean, you know, people move around in this industry. You never know. You never know when a small LP can be a reference for a potential large LP. So there are, you know, just you know, valid reasons for why you should treat everyone with the utmost respect. And, you know, frankly, anyone who's going to sign up and commit to our fund, I'm just deeply thankful for. You know, because it's a very long commitment, and, you know, in a weird way, I can't believe that you know, they would entrust their capital, you know, with us. And so, you know, my respect and appreciation doesn't go up and down commensurate with the size.
Yeah. So, Tony, I want to ask you one final question before we get to an interesting part of the interview that we're calling Tony's 5 Things. But the final question I want to ask you, and this interview begs the question, what's it like having a partner in Scott that you are obviously, you've had a long relationship with, you have a close relationship with. I mean, I don't know if it's best friend, if it's brother, or if it's merely business partner, but you guys have a very solid relationship. Talk about what that has meant over the years in terms of developing, working together, creating the firm, and now, seeing the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, so it's been a very long collaboration relationship. I met Scott when I was 20 and he was 19. And like I said, I'm 52.
Yeah.
I mentioned that we played on the rugby team. It was actually a club sport. And Scott was the president, and I eventually became the treasurer. So we ran, the team, and had a bunch of much larger, hooligans that we had to manage, back when we were much, much younger. So I think we had a little bit of practice. We also had a business in college together, apart from the rugby team.
Mhm.
And this is with one of his roommates, who is now one of our LPs. Believe it or not, wasn't fancy. We were flipping burgers for hungry students and the like. But what it did was it kicked off our business collaboration, many, many, many years ago. And then I helped recruit Scott to Ripplewood, many years ago. And then we ultimately had a working relationship together. And the reason why I believe Scott and I work really well together is that we're two completely different people. We have different personalities and different takes on many things, but at the same time, we have a very clear vision on what we want to accomplish and what is truly important. And as a result, I think we have implicit trust in one another. And a lot of people ask us, like, you can't agree on all things. I said, absolutely, we don't agree on all things.
Right.
And but we both believe in the following, which is, I think I'm going to be right, I don't know, call it 60% of the time, and Scott's going to be right 60% of the time. But if we put our heads together, I think we're going to be right like 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I would just rather be right 90% of the time.
Mhm.
And so ultimately, we will argue, we will, present our case. And if someone has a better argument, they win. And we have the trust to just say that you're more right than I am, or, we'll go with what and sometimes we can't come to an agreement. And ultimately we have the trust to say, I think you feel more strongly about this. Let's do it your way.
Yeah.
And it served us well. That algorithm has remained quite solid. And so I think I'm very fortunate to have a partner like that in Scott.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. I know that can be personal on some levels. I very much appreciate that. Let's bring it home with Tony's 5 things. So I won't make you go through the first one again, because you actually talked about it. Verbal FICO score, keeping all your promises and keeping your word. You talked about that. The second one is spend time with others, mentoring with no anticipation of an ROI. Talk a little bit more about the mentoring piece and the importance of spending time with others.
Yeah, I think it's critical, a critical thing. And again, it's really hard to measure, the ROI. What am I going to get out of this?
Yeah.
I started doing this a long time ago. And I think, Bob, it's because, if I weren't a private equity investor, I think I would have liked to have been a college professor, maybe even, a high school like teacher and coach of, whatever sport, I could coach. And I like being around younger people. I like to learn what's going on in their world, what's going on in their generation. I learn a lot from these interactions, but at the same time, I feel like I have an obligation to share my experiences so that they can make more optimal decisions and not have to waste time, figuring out things that I've already figured out, in one way, shape, or form, or at the very least, add another data point. And it's been extremely rewarding because as it turns out, there is an ROI. Again, that wasn't the basis for doing this, But many of these individuals ended up becoming prominent in our, in our industry or adjacent industries. And every now and then, I'll say, wait a minute, I know someone, like can help us with this problem. And it'll turn out to be a person I've mentored, for 10 years, and it just makes me more informed and, our firm, better informed. But that's not why I do it. But it's been extremely rewarding.
So the third one is one that a lot of people in the world don't talk about much anymore, and it's having manners and adhering to etiquette. Talk about why that's one of Tony's 5 things and what that has meant to you over the years.
So many people know my wife, and my wife is the nicest person that you could ever meet. And from an EQ standpoint, she is off the charts. Okay, and I've had a front row seat to seeing this interaction. I got married very young. I was barely 26, and I sort of had a look, you're gonna be that nice, you're gonna be walked all over, you're gonna be taken advantage of, and people associate like kindness with weakness, and I sort of had that mentality because I grew up having to fend for myself. And over the years, I just saw that my wife being far more effective, and getting what she wanted effortlessly. And it wasn't that I was discourteous. I just find that repulsive, frankly. It's just that she just went an extra gear, She wasn't neutral. She wasn't, like everybody else. She was really courteous, and really went out of her way. And as a result, things were just easier. And I remember something that my father told me a long time ago. And there was a Korean saying that he said, and it kind of translated like this, one word could get a $10,000 debt forgiven. Okay. And I remember like thinking about that for weeks on end. And he was right. In other words, being nice, being courteous, costs absolutely nothing. And you shouldn't save it for important people. You should be that way, consistent across the board, whether it's, the cleaning lady who comes and cleans the office late at night, or, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And I might be meeting, both of those individuals in the same day, but at the same time, I got to treat them the exact same. Yeah. And, I don't have a lot of, anecdotes to say, this is what it got me. But I think I've avoided, some bad situations by not being courteous. And I also think it's a much easier way to go through life.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I was really happy to see this on your list. The fourth one is one that I think it's actually my favorite of the 5. And you said there are no shortcuts to greatness. First of all, talk about what that means, but also kind of tell me where you learned that. Where did that come from?
Yeah, well, back in 1998, when I was doing buyouts in the real economy sector, a lot of people were leaving banking and private equity in droves to join the dot-com revolution. Okay. And folks old enough will remember that the first dot-com boom, happened in the late 90s. And I remember everyone was like, you got to do this, like old economy is old economy. This is the new paradigm. This is different, et cetera. And I'm a very simple person in that I won't invest in things that I don't understand, and I did not understand it. And I just kept to my knitting. And of course, we all know how that turned out. It turned out not to be so great. Oh, should probably. Okay, there we go.
There you go.
I wasn't active enough. So I stuck to my knitting. I stuck to what I knew, and lo and behold, things came crashing back to earth. And that was a very strong lesson for me, which is The main reason why people were going in that direction was the rapidity with which wealth was being, created or allegedly created.
Yep.
And that was the number one reason why people were going to do things. It wasn't because they wanted to, sell things, on the internet. It was, I want to get rich and I want to get rich fast.
Yeah.
And so I had a very early lesson in being very suspicious on things that can be attained quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, that's just been reinforced. And if you are buying a house or a car, et cetera, the last thing you want the person selling you that is to tell you how quickly they made it.
Right.
That is not a selling point. And so I think things that are worthwhile take time. And as a result, I think I've resisted the pivots in my career to things that may have seemingly garnered greater economics at an earlier age. And I think that's a mistake that many young people, particularly in cities like New York and maybe LA and San Francisco, London, what have you, these where you have an over concentration of overachievers.
Mm-hmm.
You sort of get agitated when when you hear about someone having tremendous success. You should be very happy, but by proximity, you might be happy, but you might also be like, oh my gosh, I got to get off my butt and get going myself. And so there's this agitation because time has become too important a factor.
Yeah.
And as a result, I think a lot of people have made mistakes in their careers and can make mistakes in building an organization.
Yeah, Tony, there's deep wisdom in what you just described. It resonates with me when you talk about comparative success. Washington, you didn't mention Washington, but you can throw Washington in that same mix.
True.
You have a lot of people that want to do stuff fast. They're measuring, they're competing. And the reality is that we don't all get life in the same chapters. Some people get, the later chapters first. Some people get the earlier chapters, but we all get a book, right? So the real key is figuring out your own life, not worrying about how it compares to, frankly, an independent variable, someone else's life.
Yeah, and my father used to tell me, and I learned this over and over and over again. So I'm very comfortable with the concept. There's also another saying that he say, above a guy that walks is a guy that runs, and above a guy that runs is a guy that flies. So it basically means there's always someone better. I read earlier today that Elon Musk is 53. He's 1 year older than me, and compared to me, he's accomplished so much. But Bob, I'm not losing 1 ounce of sleep on the comparative success.
Yeah.
Look, I like what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. It's going to take time. It'll take more time to get to where we think we can get to, and I'm going to enjoy it. Frankly.
No, that's a great philosophy. So I know everybody, whenever I say that there are 5 things, they want all 5. The 5th one was spend time building a network of relationships. And this is separate than the mentoring that you talked about. This is the relationship side of it. One, interpret that one for us, but also tell us what your network has meant to you over the long arc of your career.
Yeah. So a lot of my, what's interesting is that, again, we did this. I did this, and Scott, as it turned out, coincidentally, not because we had this grand plan that we were going to start a business together in the future, but we did it because that was part of our nature. And as it turned out, it ended up being extremely beneficial to us in hindsight. When we first started out, we were able to tap into that network, and we were able to stand on the shoulders of some of the people that we had known and develop relationships. And we were able to, conduct business even though we didn't have a fund right out of the gates. Mm-hmm. And that means, lawyers, writing off, bills, for deals that, died. It meant, getting, accountants and other people just to help pitch in, knowing full well that it may have been a long road before they were ultimately going to get paid, if they were to get paid. And yet, the strength of those relationships allowed us, to be in that position. And so I'm just fortunate that I didn't do my work every day and go straight home, or hang out with the same 5 buddies like over and over and over again. I'm glad I spent hundreds of hours, every year, spending time with people, outside the office. And again, it didn't matter, if they were super important, or seemingly super important or seemingly less important. The idea was to get in, FaceTime with a bunch of people. Of course, I like to hang out with people that are good people, and so other than that common denominator, I tended to spend time doing it. And then in hindsight, just over and over and over again, I can say that something really good happened because I happen to have a relationship with this person or that person. And, and by the way, the one thing I want to say to people is there are friends, and then there are very good acquaintances, meaning you can still be friends, but you don't have to talk to them every week. There are plenty of people that I know that I might only talk to, 2 or 3 times a year. And, that's okay. That concept is okay as long as you're genuine, about the approach, and, you do have a genuine interest in the other person, that's fine. That's life. And so again, I think it's been a good thing for us. It's been a good philosophy to have abided by. And frankly, now that my kids are older, I have more time to do this, because my child rearing days, during the critical parts are largely behind me. So I'm looking forward to spending even more time, interacting and getting to know new people.
Well, Tony, thank you for a fantastic interview. You have provided a lot of insights, both about yourself and about your firm. I also want to thank you for your friendship and your mentorship of me. I very much appreciate having gotten to know you and serving with you on the NAIC board. And I look forward to great things to come for you and for the One Rock team.
Bob, I really appreciate you having me. It's been a privilege. Thank you.
Awesome. Be well, Tony. I'll see you soon.
Excellent. Bye-bye.
Bye.